It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia. A quick friendly reminder, there's no need to filter Turkish coffee. Just let the grind settle on the bottom of your cup.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends, and today's host, Nick, and with me is...
Tom.
And KJ.
All right, great to have you back as always. Additionally, joining us as a guest for this episode is...
Doug.
Thanks for joining us, Doug. Doug is a longtime friend of ours going back to elementary school. You may remember Doug from our first episode, Raiders of the Lost Ark, as well as Solaris, American Graffiti, our Trio of Shorts episode, and The Fugitive. It's great to have Doug back once again as we continue our Guilty Pleasure movie block. Doug still conveniently likes movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. In the first round, each question will be worth 1 point, and in the second round, each question will be worth 2 points. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we follow up with our famous movie rant, where anything goes. KJ, tell us about today's movie.
Today we are going back to 1983 for a true guilty pleasure. Lotus 123 is released for the IBM-compatible computers. The TV show MASH ends, and McDonald's introduces the McNugget. During all this, David Cronenberg's movie Videodrome was released in theaters alongside Richard Pryor's The Toy, The Dark Crystal, Airplane 2, and Monty Python's Meaning of Life. Tom will be quizzing us today. Tom, what is Videodrome all about?
Videodrome follows Max Wren, played by James Woods, who is the head and part owner of a kind of softcore porn channel. You can think of like a precursor to Skinamax. And he's looking for something new, something harder. And he stumbles upon this kind of pirated tape of a show called Videodrome, which instead of having a plot and characters and things like that, just as one room with an electrified wall in which people are kind of tortured and killed in a sexual sadomasochistic way. And he decides that this is the new thing, and he thinks it's performed. And so he goes on a search for Videodrome to find it for his TV network. And as he does, we start to see him begin to hallucinate and come in contact with the people behind Videodrome, whose intentions are far more than providing sexual thrills. Nick, if you had one word to describe Videodrome, what would it be?
Oblivion. KJ?
Cocky. Doug?
Trippy.
And my word would be media.
It's time for question 1.
What is Civic TV's tagline?
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, I guess I'm locked in.
All right, Doug, you locked in last, so you get to go first. What do you have?
I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something like the TV station you take to bed with you.
Okay. Next up was KJ. What do you have?
Yeah, I had the channel you take to bed with you. And the logo was like a big TV that they would like put in their bed, I think.
Yeah. And Nick, what did you have?
For the people, by the people.
Okay, so the answer was the one you take to bed with you. So Doug and KJ get that. And the visual logo was a kind of somewhat rotund middle-aged man in bed with the television and kind of a let's call it satisfied grin on his face. So I brought up this question because I want, especially that visual, the visual of the man in bed with TV, right? And I wanted to talk about this idea of what the kind of the technology, the media in this film is satisfying, right? What kind of human needs this thing is satisfying? How is like personhood and personal we could call it ability or skill or humanity, etc., kind of extending outward by virtue of the media environment that this film creates.
Don't jump all in at once.
Mhm.
So Tom, let's start a little smaller. So
Okay.
so first of all, I guess one of the things well, let's start by saying this movie was made in the 80s, takes place in the 80s, right? Like the cable companies are growing. We don't have the Comcasts and the, I don't know, whatever the rest of the nation has as their big ones. So you have these smaller channels that have smaller influence, kind of building up, and eventually they get eaten by the bigger and the bigger and the bigger. So I guess what Cronenberg's trying to say is people are just sitting in front of the TV all the time. So the idea that the TV is either corrupting your mind, it's making you a couch potato, this kind of thing. So he's turning that up to 11 and saying what happens if it literally infiltrates you to a point of hallucination and influences your everyday life, that you really can't function because you start seeing images, which is what television is, all images, a little bit of audio. So can you ask your question again, Tom? Because I still feel like I'm not all the way there. I'm trying to connect these dots.
I think that makes sense, right? It's like it's this it's doing a function, right? It's performing a function in a kind of a new way. So my question, more or less, I guess, is what is that function, or how do we describe that function that television is doing in this movie?
Well, so, not to get too technical or too sci-fi, but I felt like what they were depositing is, because it was VHS tapes or Betamax tapes, whatever they were, right? So somehow in that electromagnetic tape, a signal was recorded that when you consumed it through your eyes and your ears, it left a pattern on your brain that could continue to influence you. Was kind of the dry answer. I know that's and then, they also suggested the edginess of what you're actually watching is kind of what allowed you to open your brain to these signals.
Even though this was the early 80s, I equated it a lot to what we see now, even in this internet era where people are looking for likes and clicks. So his idea to get more audience was just to show outrageous things, because people tend to be drawn to outrageous things versus the mundane. So even now, if there's research out there that shows that people are more likely to look at things that are negative than puff pieces that are good. And we see this, unfortunately, in our politics all the time. We look more at negative ads than positive. So things that create a lot of like hype or something that is different than everything else was his approach. Now, I know you want to go deeper than that, but when you first asked this question, I took it more literal. Like, what was the channel's goal? And it was to get more eyeballs by showing outrageous things. And in this case, we may deduce it to smut, okay? But he found the line of things he could broadcast. The greater meaning, I think, is what you guys are going into. But I was talking within the context of the purpose of that channel within the movie.
Yeah, I think also what you were saying about the kind of the extension of the eyeball, right, is a big thing. Because we also have like the glasses company is the villain. That's what they sell. They sell glasses and weapons to NATO. were the two
diversify.
Things. Yeah. Which I'll tell you about a musical instrument company that my dad worked for, which makes guitars and helicopter wings. But anyway, so the idea of like the extension of the eyeball kind of out onto the television, I think is a big thing. I think it's what's going on in this movie. And so your ability to see, or what you can see, or what you can consume, moves away from what's local to more and more kind of global aspects, right? Which is even more true today with the phone, where you could, see pretty much anything on Earth pretty quickly. But it was also, kind of considering like the image from Civic TV of the middle-aged man in bed, but he's not with a wife, he's with the television. and that it's sort of, taking the place of it's kind of taking the place of a lover, right? It's a technology that you've put your sort of desires onto. So you've taken your desires, instead of having that as a kind of a human thing that's sort of extended out from you into this like technology, into this new media. So I think you're right, Nick. I think it is like the extension kind of the eyeball, really.
It's time for question 2.
How does Dr. Brian Oblivion define TV while on TV on the Rena King show?
Locked in.
I don't have an answer.
Locked in with a guess.
All right, so KJ, you go first.
I don't know. TV. He defined TV as a way of getting into people's houses.
Okay. Doug, you locked in second.
Yeah, I can't even think of a plausible guess. So.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
An extension of reality.
Okay. All right, so no points there. I guess that's somewhat of a
I was
problem.
close.
You were close. I think maybe we should give Nick. So the answer is television is the retina of the mind's eye, is what he says on that show.
I'm pretty sure he said something about extension of reality.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, how about this? I think that's actually right. I think kind of that's what that phrase means. So I think I'm going to give Nick the point for, we'll call it interpretive point.
I'll take it.
How about that?
Point's
There
a
we
point.
go. Point's a point.
One interpretive point.
One interpretive point. Yeah.
I mean, regardless how you can, I was gonna say, regardless how you categorize it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited to go for interpretive points for the rest of this podcast, guys.
I think I'm the first one who got it.
Just let's bring in Brian Oblivion and let's talk about him, what he wants, what kind of his philosophy is. I'll let you know that he's based on the media scholar Marshall McLuhan, who was at the University of Toronto at the same time David Cronenberg was. McLuhan as a professor, Cronenberg as a student. They don't believe Cronenberg ever took a class with him, and he was kind of like a celebrity du jour of that university. And so, what do we think of Brian Oblivion?
So I was a little confused about Mr. Oblivion, right? So the first time we see him is on the talk show,
Dr. Oblivion.
and he's, what did I call him?
Mr. Oblivion. Dr. Oblivion.
4 years of
Respect.
media doctor school to be called Mr. Oblivion. That's his villain name. Dr. Oblivion. So when we first see Dr. Oblivion, he's on the talk show, right?
Mm-hmm.
So James Wood is seducing Nikki,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who we assume is there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Rena is interviewing Dr. Oblivion.
Mm-hmm.
So far, so good?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're talking back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yet later on in the show, his daughter says he only monologues because he doesn't exist anymore. He only exists as videotapes.
Mm-hmm.
So if she's right, then he doesn't have an objective because he only exists as monologuing videotapes that's probably serving the new flesh or something like that. I forget what they call out sometimes.
They call it the new flesh. Mm-hmm.
The new flesh. So the movie is very contradictory about how Dr. Oblivion works. So I don't know what his motives were. I don't know that he had any.
I'm gonna take a stab at this. So it almost seemed like I don't want to say a cult, but a church or a religion. So this is later in the film, maybe 30 minutes plus in, where apparently the hobos and derelicts of society are carted into this place that normally we would think would be providing them meals and a place to wash up. But no, it provides them TV media to consume. And when he's speaking with, when I say he, what's the main character's name?
Max.
Sorry.
James Wood.
When Max, yeah, I know James Wood. When Max is speaking with Dr. Oblivion's daughter, who's running the show there, she explains that Dr. Oblivion's purpose and the purpose of this mission is to bring these people back into the fold. So by consuming this media, they are now back in society. I don't necessarily completely understand it, but that's their goal. So again, instead of, warm showers, food, and drinks, they are allowing them to watch TV, and that will bring them back into the light of organized society.
So why is she continuing his mission? Does she believe it too then?
Oh, I think so. So I think the idea of like so there's a few things I think we have here. We have like the corporality of Brian Oblivion, which is highly suspect, and like what he wants, and then what this mission's goal is. Because I think it's tied directly to the goal of Brian Oblivion and Bianca. And what I think with like the whole kind of the network being put back in or plugged back into the mixing board of the world is what Bianca says about what her institution, the cathode ray mission is supposed to do. And I think what that is supposed to
Could remember. That's it.
Yeah, I think what that's supposed to mean is that this seems to be drawn from McLuhan, is where Cronenberg seems to be getting this idea, is that there's this sort of connection between all people thanks to the TV, right? That this is creating what McLuhan calls it like a global village. Everybody's tied together because instead of like just being local and not knowing what's going on the other side of the hill or something, you can see it, right? It's kind of satellited out to you, beamed onto the television. And for people who don't have that technology, they're like not in the village. They're kind of isolated from the world. And I think when you think of television as the new flesh, which is Oblivion's, kind of famous line, he I don't even know if he says it, but it's sort of attributed to him, is that it's not only is it like the global village, not only is this a thing that you're experiencing by being kind of plugged in and just looking at television, but it's actually affecting your physical experience of the world. And so this sort of border penetration, border play between the physical person and the television person, or the television representation, they're sort of collapsing into one another. And I think that it has a lot to do with like why Oblivion is on the Rena King show in a position that he shouldn't be, right? Like he's dead by that point, isn't he?
Presumably.
Yeah. I think she said it's been 20 years. He's only monologued for 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, you could also say like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I mean, if he's recording it in advance.
So I think it was 11 months. His daughter says he's been dead 11 months, but
11 months, 20 years.
It was 20 years that he's only communicating in monologues, but he only died 11 months ago. So he has a lot of pre-recorded tapes, which were used in that interview.
That's the impression I got, was that he's just recorded so many things that like that exists, that line of conversation exists in that warehouse of tapes he's made.
His daughter addresses that. She says he had thousands of tapes and he'd record multiple tapes in one day.
Yeah. And so it's even there, it's like a monologue, right? If you think of that tape as being recorded in advance.
Well, and that's why I thought he was interacting with Rena. So
I don't remember that, Cage, so that's why I can't.
But
I thought she just hit play.
Yeah. But he is communicating with her, right? Like she asks a question and he says stuff and she's like, okay. And he also is watching Max. He's watching Max and Nikki. He's looking at them. And so I think I don't think it's
Is he though, or is that just presumed?
He's looking over there like this, and then he turns to Rena.
Yeah, I think he looks at him like, why aren't you paying attention?
Or he's paying attention to them, whatever. He seems to be recognizing the space, right? That's,
His daughter just picked the right film, I think.
Yeah, I think there's that, but I think there's also what Cronenberg's doing is kind of mixing it up, right? It's like, this is the new flesh, right? He's in, he's a video thing now. He's like a video person. he's in the new media. He's transcended.
So even if he wasn't dead, it would be very strange because he's just, his face is on that monitor, and he would be looking from that monitor, from the perspective of that monitor to the people in the room, as opposed to, at least what I thought originally when watching that scene, that he was being recorded live somewhere else, but the camera would be in a different location than the monitor that he would be looking at. So he wouldn't be looking at them in the, from that point of view.
Makes sense. It's not a hologram.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is, which I think there could be a lot of theories, but one of them is that he actually does exist in a digital form. And it's not just a pre-recorded tape. He's actually just there inside the TV.
Yeah, that's what I think is going on. I think that's part of the body horror. I think it's like, this happens with the Cronenberg movies, with the early ones, the pre-History of Violence movies. It's a big part of. Did you guys see Existence, the video game movie he made? You saw it, Doug?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I think I saw it shortly after it came out, so I don't remember
like 20
too much.
years, yeah.
Except for the ending, but I won't ruin it for you guys that didn't see it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of there's a video game where you plug in like a VR, but it looks like an umbilical cord. It looks like parts of a body. It doesn't look, like a Mac or anything like that. But I think that's the body horror in this, is what you're saying, Doug, which is like the integrity of the body is being violated, right? It is not that which we think of as a body. It's now like this electric thing, and it seems like Max throughout this, because of the hallucinations, is also in between, right? His body is not video yet. It's becoming not body anymore. We see the gun becomes attached to him in a sort of way. And that's it, because Oblivion talks about getting the tumor, right? He gets a tumor and dies, presumably because of the brain tumor. But he says what does he say? The Videodrome didn't cause the tumor caused Videodrome.
It's like another growth, another being, something else developing.
Like that.
Yeah, but I think that's again that kind of play of video and flesh that you're talking about, Doug, is it's altering the body.
I think it's related to this. What is consciousness, and why does it actually have to be in a human body? Why can't it actually just be digital? So I think this has been covered in lots of other movies and TV shows, but I think this kind of asks that question. Why can't somebody exist just on video? If they're, well, they didn't get into I guess the technical side of things, but if your brain is neurons and information, why can't that be recreated digitally? So anyway, so I think it's a valid theory that Brian Oblivion is digitally alive, even though his body is dead.
At the end of round one, we have an exciting 3-way tie. Everyone's got a single point. Great job, guys. You got 50% right. Okay, we're ready for round two right after this break. Dr. Pat Stevens, DDS, has just invented a great new diet plan: drinking sewage. Dr. Stevens, from years of dental research, has just determined that for every mouthful of raw sewage consumed, you can burn up to 10 calories. That's up to 1,000 calories for 100 swallows of genuine raw sewage. You'll be looking nice and slim for the summer. Just pick up Dr. Stevens' new book, The Uber Sue Diet. Unlock your inner slop, or order Dr. Stevens' new supplement, Runoff Juice, sewage with an additional 15 grams of protein per serving. Diet Sewage. Get fit today. Side effects include massive weight gain, bad breath, spotty skin, yellowing teeth, hair loss, tongue fattening, lactating eyeballs, loss of outer layer of skin, direct verbal communication with the factitious characters of lesser-known Henry James novellas, loss of neighbors, 5% increase in breakdance efficiency, loss of friends, loss of spouse, loss of pets, flawless Bruce Springsteen impression, loss of home, whirling dervish, loss of family, loss of uncle, redwood. I refuse to explain what that means. You can look it up if you're curious. Loss of faith in man, loss of faith in God, flawless Rick Springfield impression, loss of faith in the deistic oneness of the universe, ability to see in 4 dimensions, beautiful rainbow-colored tears, ability to see in 6 dimensions, vanilla-flavored flatulence, moderate cleanliness, ability to see in 1 dimension, hypnotic suggestibility, loss of heartbeat, blaming all of contemporary society's problems on 14th century Franciscan scholastic William of Ockham, pleasurable urination, the wrath of Khan, loss of upper lip, ability to communicate with fire ants, gravitational mendaciousness, an unexpected appreciation of soft cheeses, expansion of lower lip, sympathy for the devil, ability to open and close black holes less than 2 millimeters in diameter but larger than 1 nanometer in diameter, flawless George Segal impression, widening of feet anywhere from an increase of 2 inches to an increase of 14 feet. Ability to generate a blood-curdling cry reminiscent of a 19th century Irish banshee. Becoming so charismatic, even your closest friends and worst enemies will not be able to resist you. The end of the planet. A psychoschematic skin condition known casually as lube love. Again, I refuse to explain what that means. Look it up if you care. Unbridled hatred for Merriam-Webster dictionaries. Loss of stomach. A flawless Tad Hunter impression. Dragonheart. An unwanted appreciation for the music of Steely Dan, magnetic fingernails, a 2 to 7% increase in pretension, and a 1 to 5% increase in pretentious-based activities such as experimental theater and dive bar attendance. Ramen noodles. It just says ramen noodles without context. The ability to orally consume denim, an autochthonic larynx, flawless Kenny G impression, the ability to feel love at least one more time, alpaca appreciation, becoming a modern Cassandra by being able to tell in advance what Diet Mountain Dew flavors will fail but having no one believe you, perfect pitch, repression of all memories of Bob Dole, fear of dwarf camels, and shortness of breath.
And we're back. We're at the key point of our episode where we ask the guests a critical question. Doug, if you could watch this movie with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Well, it would have to be David Cronenberg, so I can ask him what it all means, because I don't think anyone else knows.
Normally, I'd say that's a cop-out, but in this case, I'd actually like to know what it all means as well. So I'm on board. Are we taking this movie literally, or is it all hallucinations?
Is he like, do we know him? Like, would he want to watch a movie? Like, would he answer? Like, is he, who is, like, I don't know. I've never seen an interview.
When he did a commentary track for the Criterion Collection, so you could hear him watching the movie and talking about it if you want to do that.
But is he cool? Like, would he be a good guy to watch this with? Like,
well, he's Canadian,
cool?
So it's,
Oh yeah,
That's a jerk. I did notice that this was filmed in Canada, actually, in the closing credits. Not that it was worried about coming up. I just happened to see that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story about tax credits that factors into the production of this movie, but I won't bore you with that. I'll let Doug take it. Yeah.
Maybe you'll have a nice B-side on that.
Huh. So what do you think he would say, Doug?
I don't know. That's why I would pick him. I think on the subject of hallucinations, I would say from the point where Max first sees the Videodrome recording, which he thinks is a broadcast at the time. I think at that point, you don't know whether anything is a hallucination or not.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that's where the middle of the movie I got intrigued, but I never really got to the payoffs. The only thing that I could really understand to be a hallucination is that when he was carrying the gun, he would see it attached to him, but there were other scenes where you could clearly see that the gun was not attached, or he was opening a gate or doing something. And then all of a sudden, when it came down to a critical moment, that thing is attached to his hand again. So that's the only like firm thing I can say we see as an audience of a difference.
So that one was interesting because he uses it. I think he first uses it to kill his partners at the station. And when he does, it's a normal gun. It's not a weird thing. And then when they die, it's, normal. But then I believe the second time he uses it, which is against, what's his name? Barry Convex. It's the weird, I think they call it the flesh gun. And he, after he gets shot, he's starts bubbling and exploding. And then again at the end, I think those are the 3 times where he actually uses the gun. And then at the end when he uses it on himself, it's the weird, the weird version.
Yeah, it's evolving. It starts off just like wires into his hand, and then by the end it's like a flesh mitt.
Yeah, but it happens before he uses it normally, which is what is weird to me, because it goes back from the weird version to the normal one and then back again. So
It's time for question 3.
What is the new eyeglass line from Spectacular Optical called?
Locking that one in.
Oh, tie lock with Doug and Nick. Oh man, I'm gonna let Doug have the guest privilege. We'll call it.
Did KJ get in on it?
He isn't locked yet. He's thinking deeply. For the people at home, when KJ thinks about a question, he looks upward and kind of scratches his chin. He looks very much like Rodin's The Thinking Man.
KJ gets that a lot.
Yeah.
They usually call me Rodin, but it's usually a Godzilla reference. I think it helps to rattle the brain back and forth, and it's so empty. You're just making sure it's empty. That locked in with a guess.
All right, what's your guess?
Is it the eye pinner?
Okay, Nick, what do you have?
It is the Medici collection, or Medici, depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Doug, what do you have?
Medici or Medici, yep.
Nick and Doug have it correct, the Medici line. So I brought this up. I wanted to ask what you guys thought of Barry Convex and his role in this film.
I actually liked Barry Convex because he kind of came out of nowhere. And I thought the story was taking me into the Dr. Oblivion had some other nefarious plans to recruit all the deviants in society and convert them through mind control, which clearly was not the way the movie was going. And then all of a sudden you got this guy who runs a glasses corporation really trying to do evil things and, make assassins from watching S&M videos. So it was definitely a twist.
Yeah, do you remember why they're doing it?
So they want to kind of purge a segment of the population, the people who are, I guess, depraved enough to want to watch Videodrome in the first place.
Yes, because they said the rest of the world is getting harder and we're getting softer, and it'll work itself out.
Yeah, there's this kind of idea. There's like a tribal idea there, right? We're gonna separate ourselves out, and I love they have to say like North America is getting hard because it's a Canadian film, so like they can't just say Canada's getting soft and the rest of the world's getting hard. They have to like join us in this kind of bizarre binational nationalism. But Yeah, that seems to be the thing there with Barry Convex, is there's this like I don't want to say rejection of technology, but there seems to be a rejection of sort of the philosophy that Oblivion has, right? Like Oblivion wants everybody kind of patched in and joined together, and Videodrome is the means of transcendence. And like that makes sense if you look at Oblivion's office, right? It's just filled with Catholic iconography. Um, did anybody else find that weird? Like his office is just it's just all Catholic statues and a medieval tapestry and whatnot. Apparently, Marshall McLuhan, who he's based on, was a very, very devout daily mass Catholic.
Well, there's a lot of
I guess-
religious undertones to that cathode ray mission or whatever the heck it was called. So
Mhm.
that was very strong. Going back to Mr. Convex, I just love that his name is on the money because that has to do with like how eyeglasses correct like farsightedness with like convex lenses. So like, and they have this lens company, glass company that's also trying to do this crazy stuff. So yes, also the bombs or whatever they're selling to NATO. It was so ridiculous that I loved the involvement of his character in this film. I don't know why, more than I probably should.
Well, I think it's a comedy. This movie's, the villains are Barry Convex, and the secretive sort of victim is Brian Oblivion. This is, these are jokes.
Definitely.
Yeah. But I think what Barry Convex is looking for is like kind of more worldly. There's power there. He definitely wants power, but there seems to be this kind of nationalist kind of separating things out or controlling people, I think.
I can speak to that. His role is to correct people's vision, not only with glasses, but how they approach their life and society. So he's doing it,
Mhm.
Micro and macro.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, he's it's a technology that extends the human eyeball, but it's also he's leading their vision, right? They're not transcending of their own accord. He's leading their vision, and he's getting rid of people who he can't lead, right? Who aren't fit, who aren't desirable. I was wondering why they call it the Medici line, because it's an interesting comparison to like the art of Oblivion's office, which is clearly for the pleasure of the art, and then the Medici line, which is to sell this new eye line, this new line of eyeglasses. I think at one point during the presentation, he's like, "Yeah, Ben, even you could sell this." It's that type of thing. So that also seemed to be an interesting contrast. So there was also this kind of humanistic, artistic, flourishing thing on both sides, on the Oblivion side and on the Convex side, but towards different ends.
It's time for question 4.
What is Max first doing in the very beginning of the movie?
Locked in.
Locked in.
I have an answer, but I'm nervous.
I'm wondering if this is a trick question because
Yeah.
I'm thinking it was pretty obvious, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm in the same spot, Doug. I'm thinking I'm certainly locked in because I know exactly what it is, but then I'm nervous there was something that happened for a few minutes before this. But locked in?
All right. So we'll start with KJ. What do you have?
I believe he was watching some VHSs, some films from Japan.
Yes, I believe these might have been naughty films from Japan, but yes.
I thought he was just waking up because he was watching a video from, I guess, his assistant telling him about his first meeting of the day. And I think she said like, "Good morning," or "This is your wake up call," or something like that.
That's right. The movie opens with James Woods' Max sleeping and he's waking up. So this movie starts in a dream, and the video actually starts even before Max wakes. Right, the video is playing, and then afterwards we see Max get up. So the first moments of the movie are in a sort of pseudo. We don't know whose perspective is looking at the secretary's video in the first moments of the movie. And so this kind of idea of, I brought this question up from Bishop Barclay, esse est percepi. He has this famous quote, "To be is to be perceived," which seems to trace throughout this idea of like perceiving creates and that type of thing. And I was interested in what you guys thought of along that line, the sort of hallucinations that were going on throughout the picture, and what that says about our main character Max's consciousness.
I think I'm hallucinating right now because I thought I had the answer right, and then Doug said it, and I realized I was completely wrong. I have no idea how I missed that.
So I'm a little embarrassed. I didn't realize that was a hallucination. I thought they were just abusing their use of the channel that they had. Right? I don't know when, but at some point they didn't play TV all night. So I just assumed they just broadcasted his day. Like he was the head of the channel. So every day he woke up at 6:30 and got exactly what he needed. He didn't care if other people did. So I didn't realize that was a hallucination.
I don't even know if it is.
They told everyone else where his meeting was.
Yeah.
There was a scene later in the film where and I think it's his secretary, drops off his wake up video. So that actually wasn't his news channel. That was a video, I guess, that is set to play at a certain time.
Yeah, it's a cassette. Yeah. It's a weird system, but
very efficient.
Friday, here's what I need you to do. Record what I'm going to do tomorrow. Drop it off at my house the night before. And that's the first thing I'm going to play.
No, but he didn't even play it. There's a timer, wow. KJ. There's a VHS timer that goes on. They're advanced.
Wow.
So wouldn't he be tempted to look in advance? Like, why, are you going to wait until the next day to find out what the schedule is like?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. And I don't know if it's a hallucination. It's just it's introduced in a kind of an uncertain way, right? We're not sure who's watching this movie at first when we're introduced to the picture. And I think that uncertainty of being trapped in a perception that we can't trust is, takes us all the way through the picture.
So when I first saw this, so I knew it was a science fiction movie, but I didn't know how like science fiction it was. So I thought it might have been like an AI, talking to him, on his computer. And then I was surprised to see that she was a real person later on. But it's also not set in the future. So
but Doug, I was in the same boat, where I thought it might have been something like that, because we've seen other, how do I put it, earlier movies in the 80s and such that are showing it an advanced society, but still have CRT TVs. So like that didn't throw me off, that technology wasn't flat screens and all that. So I actually thought you might be right, that it was some kind of virtual assistant or something. And then all of a sudden, it's a real person. So I was on that same. But again, how many minutes into the movie are we? Have no other information.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to start it. It's disorienting right at the front.
Well, and going back to the word hallucination, Tom, television is a hallucination, right?
How so?
Anytime you watch it, you are seeing something that's not physically there. You're watching an image of something. So in general, television is a hallucination, and Videodrome is then bringing that to the person, kind of like what we said in the beginning of this episode. So the extension of a hallucination not requiring a CRT or a screen or a VHS tape or a broadcast, it just feels like a natural extension of what television is, right? Television, seeing something that's far away, you're now seeing something close that isn't physically there.
Okay, and that makes it hallucinatory? I mean, hallucination seems to be, by definition, seeing that which isn't present, which you're kind of saying, right? You're saying you're seeing something that isn't actually there. But is it less real than, seeing something in front of you? I mean, presumably you're seeing something that was filmed, right? That did exist at one point. It's what has changed is that distance and time have been collapsed.
True. And I guess you can share the hallucination of television with everybody, right? Nobody's going to disagree that those images are changing on the screen. That's true.
However, if that broadcast creates other images in your mind or other thoughts that are not there. So I think this is what Cronenberg is playing with. So of course, when we bring something up and say define, I have to look it up. So hallucination is defined as an experience involving the apparent perception of something not present. So we can get really deep on if it was pre-recorded and now it's coming out of a TV, is that truly present or is it just electrons or other things? So I think that was his whole point of using that media to express these thoughts to the audience.
Yeah, but then KJ is right. It isn't. That's an interesting thing, right? Is that it is a hallucination, and we spend so much time with this hallucination. More time than with the non hallucinatories, the boring people, as we call them. So it's interesting. We're more invested, at least in the 80s, and probably even more now with our phones and Wi-Fi and what have you, in the hallucination and not in reality. That's more quote unquote real. It's almost like hallucination and reality are no longer opposites, right? We have to use a different kind of paradigm.
You sound like Dr. Oblivion, Tom.
The retina of the mind's eye is in the mind's eye television or something. I don't know. In the lead and our winner this week is Doug. Congratulations, Doug. Yay.
Wow.
Very good. You did it.
You win.
You won the Videodrome.
Yes, you've won the Videodrome. Great work.
Wait, you don't want to win the Videodrome.
3 entered.
It's so much worse than Thunderdome.
It's time for Movie Rent.
Okay, so one thing in KJ's notes, we do notes for you home listeners, and one thing in KJ's notes that struck me as interesting. There's a number of things, but one thing I wanted to bring up was the shock value of this movie, and could Cronenberg achieve what he wanted to achieve without the shock value? And I thought about that a lot, and I was actually wanted to start, instead of with my notes, with that question, like, what is the value of the shock in the movie?
The crazy thing is, I've seen a lot of Cronenberg references in society, and again, I had never seen one, so I was actually expecting even more shock value. So I knew there was going to be some body horror, dysmorphia type themes. So I think I was mentally prepared for it. Whereas if I didn't have that baggage, if you will, I think I would have been really like, what the heck is going on here? So it's kind of funny. My perception of it before I watched it may have affected my view.
But even if we take, like, let's say you made this about like an up and coming television network, not a softcore porn network, but just like an early cable network, that's trying to get itself off the ground.
Instead of taking it to bed with you, you take it to the garden with you, or something like that.
Yeah, whatever. And they're looking at this kind of exciting new program. I mean, in part, the plot kind of falls apart because it's about Barry Convex wants to destroy the undesirables, right? So it's you have to kind of create something there, but I still think the themes are present even without that particular plot of Convex's. And I was just wondering, is there something? So my answer to that question, I'll say, kind of relates to the first question, not to answer my own question or KJ's question, but it seems to be like the extension of human activity and human ability into things outside of ourselves, such as, like, if you hit a nail with a hammer, you've now extended that ability into the hammer, and so that kind of, you put yourself into that, right? And for Civic TV, the one you take to bed with you, it's, you've, instead of having a kind of sexual experience with a partner, and this is a human thing you do, it's now become a new media. Like the desire itself is a media. It's a technology that gives you, that gives you satisfaction, gives you desire and satisfaction of that desire. Um, and it seems to be a very, very eerie way of describing technology. Um, it kind of gets at the maybe not dehumanizing, but certainly the bizarreness of that experience.
I believe I have a real life comparison now, not to this level of content, but something where a modern network took a stab at attracting a different audience. And bear with me on this one, but Cartoon Network, they're predominantly cartoons, children, I guess now varying ways, but then they started something late night called Adult Swim. Okay, so this is going back in time. Adult Swim was a chance to have more of the adult themed cartoon content, as well as explore anime and other things that were not mainstream. And it actually became a success. So even though it was a smaller channel, they brought different type content to attract an audience and show a Western audience that there is other type of media out there worthy of consumption than what is being provided by the norm of the standard networks. That's my modern interpretation without all the body horror and mind control.
Yeah, it's they're also trying to kind of grab your attention, or maybe extend childhood. This idea of the cartoon as a place where you store childhood, possibly that experience, that nostalgia, that you make an adult version of that. It's sort of, I don't know, it sort of converts that nostalgia into something else, possibly.
That's just something I thought of with this small channel that's trying to opening up an audience.
Yeah.
Not necessarily all the other deeper themes in this, but I that came to mind.
Yeah.
Well, some of the major themes that we were talking about Videodrome include like the global village, right? So I think you could certainly hint on that or explore that idea without the edginess, without the but one of the big things in this is James Wood is so cocky, right? He is incredibly right, cavalier, and I think that's, I don't want to say it's an important part of this movie, but that fits well with the edginess, right? He's dealing with things that are outside of most people's norms, and he kind of just rolls with it, right? It doesn't seem like he's into this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
He doesn't seem to be particularly sleazy. He just seems to be good at his job.
Right.
That's more of what I thought I was going to get into with this movie. I thought it was going to be some smut peddler. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. And there was more to it than that.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting when Nikki goes to burn herself with the cigarette. He has a really strong no. Like he's really shocked at that point, but you would think he's seen so much stuff, and it's already established, that she's sadomasochistic, and it's not like, I mean, it's disturbing, but it's not like, she's gouging her eye out or cutting her arm off or something.
But even when he watches the video of Videodrome, he's still convinced that it's fake. That even when the other media agent or whatever her title is says, no, that stuff's real. Those people are being tortured and killed. He's like, no. That is just some amazing production quality value,
Yeah, he doesn't. He says, I don't believe it. Yeah.
Well, we never see anyone get killed on Videodrome, right? I mean, you see the torture, right?
You kind of see Oblivion die.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
And Nikki, unless that was a hallucination.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, I think part of the shock, too, is the sort of like, you're becoming your technology, right? This idea of the cyborg is not, it's not like Terminator, right? Where it's kind of easy to digest. You get the idea of the Terminator. It's a robot with human skin and aging potential. With this, it's like the cyborg is all of us. Like your personhood is being violated by these kind of media experiences. And that's harder to gesture to, I think, with something like Cartoon Network, right? Where it's like, hey, it's fun to watch these cartoons. It's not doing anything. I'm just watching cartoons. And I think, like the, Brian Oblivion would say, no, it's changing everything. You're changing because you're watching cartoons. You're changing because your mind's eye is now the television, right? That is your mind outside of yourself. That's something new, and that's something weird. And I think by having it be porn and having it be kind of tough porn, it's sort of the kind of the cold water in the face to be like, no, this kind of casual entertainment, this casual media, this is doing something, and what it's doing isn't you're not able to plan it. It's not calculable. We don't know what is going to come of this, but it isn't normal. This is new. And I think it also ties into this idea, Kitty, you were mentioning, of the global village. Marshall McLuhan, who is, Oblivion, basically thought that you had these kind of tribal societies where before pre-writing, you needed the tribe because you needed to communicate, and you only could communicate through word of mouth. Writing comes along, and writing allows for communication without connection, right? You could just read the thing that somebody else has written down. But what the television world does is it creates access, like you're saying, KG, hallucinations, maybe we might call it, to other times and other places. And these hallucinations, or this access, creates the village life again, the village life that we saw pre-writing. But it does it not in this kind of individual local way, but it makes all of us, everyone in the world, part of a single village, the global village. And so it's this ironic term, because those are supposed to be set against each other, globalness and the state of the village being a kind of stand-in for locality, when in fact the media world plugs you in to everything everywhere. It makes the hallucination the reality.
The interesting thing about that is, especially in the 80s, is you had a monoculture, right? You had what? I don't know, 50 channels on TV. So
relative to now, yeah.
Maybe you had 50 channels. I didn't have 50 channels. I had
10
like
or whatever,
5
right?
channels.
But today we have way more stuff to watch, and it's not a monoculture, right? I think The Onion had an article that was guy found another guy that had heard of his favorite band. Like, we just there's no other we don't have that shared. Not everybody is watching Wizard of Oz or whatever was broadcast on CBS on Saturday morning. That's gone. So in the 80s, I can understand why that global village may have even been like a fear, like, oh no, we're gonna lose something because we're all just consuming the same thing. But what Videodrome and Cronenberg couldn't predict is we've moved away from that. We're now almost, I don't know if we're too far the other way, but there's so many things to watch. It's tough to find people that had a shared experience, right? Game of Thrones was incredible because a few million people watched it, which is nothing compared to like MASH or something like this. But at least let's talk about this because we both watched the same show. We happen to watch that. It's part of the reason we started the podcast, I feel like, is so that we could all pick a movie and discuss it. So I think we still have a global village, but it's kind of opt in, opt out.
I think it's a really, really good point. It's like the cyborg nature, being attached to your phone all the time, which is definitely kind of this McLuhan Cronenberg cyborg thing, didn't make the global village. It kind of returned us to the regular village. It's still hallucinatory because you're still not right there with the person in front of you or whatnot, but it's still not universal, right? And that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's not universal. And what's also kind of interesting is your village isn't local, right? I'm not saying we lost the global part of the village, but it's not universal. But the people that I communicate with, their location doesn't matter, right? Who's listening to this podcast? Nobody. But if they were, now they're sharing these thoughts with us wherever they are in the world, as opposed to, we went, to the coffee house on Friday night to listen to these guys talk about a movie or something, right? Like it's so we still are global, but I like that word. We're not universal.
Yeah, it's global local hallucination.
I'd like to once again congratulate our winner of the week, which is Doug. Congrats for no, not flawless. What, 3 or 4? Not too
Yeah,
not
3
too
out of 4.
shabby. Check out our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com, for more information about us and our episodes. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as our YouTube channel. We are extremely grateful for any positive reviews, as those help others like you find us. If you like what you hear, remember to like and subscribe to our show. Have you ever found a stray broadcast, and why? Let's continue the conversation on Twitter at Talking Studios. Have additional thoughts? Email us at talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com or give us a call at 201-467-8679 for a chance to be featured on one of our future From the Listeners episodes. Thanks again for joining us today, Doug. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Doug_Ewan.
People can find me on Twitter at ThomasLehman15. B-sides coming back. I'm doing a B-side for this this episode. So Talking Pictures Trivia B-side, and look for that. That'll be out the same time this is.
And you can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time when we discuss Nick's recommendation, which is my recommendation, from 1987, The Running Man. I'm so looking forward to this one. Stay tuned for our first impressions of The Running Man. Ding, 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 ding.
So The Running Man, this one was one I watched when traveling for work, I don't know, in 2014 or something. So the first time I watched it was a pretty low-res movie file on my laptop, probably in Ohio or Milwaukee or somewhere. And I loved it. It was silly, fun, great movie to watch when you're sitting in a hotel kind of bored anyway. I did a rewatch now. I think it was a slightly better file, but still on my laptop. And you know, it's a fun Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. How about you guys? How'd you watch The Running Man?
This time recently, I watched it first on I forgot, it was one of the streaming services, one of like the big 3 or the big 4. Watched it then. It was late night when my kids were asleep, so I started watching it like on my phone, and then I started watching on the TV. You know, it was in like pieces. And then the second time that I watched it was from a file that you had shared with me, and both were good. But it was like, oh man, this takes me back to I watched it, you know, kind of, I want to say in the, I guess it would have been the 90s, soon after it came out, or the late 90s. And then I also watched it in college, just, you know, one of those nights where, you know, a bunch of college buddies are watching cheesy movies. So a couple of times in my life, but most recently, yeah, a couple, you know, through the file you share with me, and then on a couple of streaming service, or on a streaming service. And it was just as I remembered it.
Yeah, I think I watched this in the 90s, probably with Nick on a VHS, because I remember the VHS. I think it was a VHS that wasn't ours. Like, we found it. It wasn't official. It was sort of.
I'll tell you all about that soon.
Okay,
Ty.
yeah. And then I rewatched it on the computer. And yeah, you know, it's. I read the book also, the one of the Bachman books, the Stephen King Bachman books, and. Yeah, it's, you know, it's a movie. You know, it's on celluloid. You can see it. Yeah, it's kind of. I was just fascinated by like the connections between the cast and like whatever the greater reality of the picture. Like the bodybuilder guy, you know, Sven, the big guy who works for the company as like a security guard. I found out he has done 15 movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and is Arnold Schwarzenegger's most common collaborator. And so like little things like that kept popping up when I was trying to look into the movie. And so I enjoyed that maybe more than the actual picture. But I do remember being at Nick's house as a child watching The Running Man and thinking like it was like, oh, it was a really badass movie. Like, this is so dark. It's so dark. They're, you know, this is how they treat criminals in 2017, the way future. So that was my experience.
for our loyal listeners out there, you may remember this glorious day when I was on my way walking to 6th grade, and I came across a treasure trove that I could not believe. There were 2 giant paper bags full of VHS tapes. And I decided that I'm going to take both of these to school that day, have them in the classroom all day long, and then bring home these random sacks of VHSs to see what I had found. And among those films was The Running Man. Now, apparently a person must have copied every single thing that was on HBO for a certain period of time. So this is also where I saw The Road Warrior, Conan the Barbarian, and a variety of other films in that generation, which may be why I enjoy that part of cinematic history so much. I love The Running Man. This is the definition of a guilty pleasure. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be great. It has to be Arnold. And that's exactly what it is. It has the most cheese. I think the amount of cheese in this movie is the most you can concentrate within an Arnold film, action film. I think it may have the most cheesy lines within a single movie, but I'll save the rest of that for the episode.
I can picture the exact TV that you guys must have watched it on, Nick, in your folks' house. And when I picture that TV, I picture the static because it had an antenna. And so I don't think we were usually watching movies. I didn't realize you had a VCR. But so when I'm picturing you guys watching The Running Man, it's through a layer of static, which I think might improve the movie. Like it might then add to this world, this environment of.
Yeah.
I think that may have been because it was recorded off of HBO. But I don't know.
And I think it also ties into this idea, KJ, you were mentioning of the global village, which, should we say what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. So the global village also comes from Marshall McLuhan, aka who's,
yeah. That's what KJ was going to say.
I did too. Yeah.
I was trying to think of like a definition or whatever. I'm like, no, Tom's going to say it so much better. So instead I just said, yeah.